Welcome back, fellow enemies of the fire. Today we got something very special. So the Total Soccer Show looked at the void and saw a bunch of Chicago Fire fans and said, why aren't the Chicago Fire better? So they did an episode called, they do a big thing episode where they stick to one topic, and they kind of went through the timeline and what's going on with Chicago and the Chicago Fire. Myself and James have both heard it before. DPG is fresh to all of this, and honestly, man, gentlemen, we're just going to react to a few segments here and kind of give our thoughts and opinions on where they stand.
Because they had some great things to say. All right, here we go. Apple, check them out on Apple Podcast, Total Soccer Show. We love listening to them. Always been a fan for years and years and years. We'll have the link in the description. And here we go.
Shout out to Daryl, R.I.P.
Shout out to Daryl.
Taylor Rocco. Hello, Taylor.
Hello, I am nervous.
Okay, don't be nervous. It's okay. We'll hold your hands the whole way.
This is another one of those episodes that could be a book or several books, and also has lots of passionate people who have written many things, talked about this at length. So it feels like if we don't do this justice, we're going to hear about it. So I hope we do. I hope we do, Chicago supporters.
Indeed. Here to help us do justice, Joe Lowry. Hello, Joe.
Hey, Ryan, I'm just glad that Paul Tenorio's too busy writing his book to listen and give us critical feedback on this episode. So
how many different journalists have written? How many times have we all sat and watched the show, the TV, and all known exactly what the problem is with this team, and for some reason they can't figure it out. It's painful. God, as a Fire fan. You know, they don't mention it in this episode, but just the editorial. Back when soccer news was so sparse, you had to listen to state-run media. And for them to write this editorial about how terrible the fans were to poor Andrew Hopman, like the tone deafness of it, that's a theme. Tone deaf, that's a theme. I'm sorry.
No, it's all
James,
right.
I just... Yeah, they were doing their intros.
Yeah, they were letting Joseph Lowry know, and I've talked to Joe before, and yeah, it's great to hear him talk about this. He definitely knows a lot what's going on. And then there are some things, they do get maybe a little bit wrong, but at the same time, I think that there's a lot of great stuff in here that we could talk about, dissect, and further add to.
Or that was going to be my question.
Hello?
I'm just going to assume that Malort tastes worse.
Okay,
it does.
As you possibly can. Winning MLS Cup, winning US Open Cup in their first year. And had this potential to be an institution, to be one of the huge teams in Major League Soccer.
And something went really wrong.
And then that has fully fallen by the wayside. And so,
I mean, 2 Eastern Conference final appearances in 2008 and 2009
is a conversation we're having. I think also on a personal level, whenever Joe and I do MLS roundups or when Goss is with us, it feels like inevitably, I think my question for Joe this week was basically Chicago still bad? It just feels like a lazy thing. I don't love talking about teams in a lazy way, but it's been the case for so long for Chicago that it's difficult to talk about anything other than that. And even looking at the way
pause that,
their own media,
so that's literally, we've fallen into this rut already. And we're only on match day 12. We come to the episode and we're like, I'm so mad, but how many different ways can I say fire Frank Lopez? How many different ways can I say Garrick Heights is not the way? We're the most consistent team in the league. We're consistently in the exact same level of bad all the time.
Besides San Jose Earthquakes.
Yeah, Go ahead.
I think I was going to say, I think a lot of it too is either Joe Mansueto's ignoring when everybody's talking about the Fire, because this is not the first time we've heard, this is from a podcast. I mean, we've heard it on the MLS show on Apple TV from what's his face?
Oh yeah, Bradley Wright Phillips. Yeah, we talked about that.
So it's I don't know if Joe thinks that somehow something's going to change, or Garrick Heights is just going to do something different one season. I don't know what it is, but whatever he's doing, and I've called him out on it. I've said this. I'm like, this guy he's beginning to look more or less like another Andrew Hoffman, but with more money.
Which is wild, because there was no Hopman was trying to make money off of this thing.
Yeah.
This dude isn't making any money. He's just throwing it away. And it's like, you should be better.
Well, when they talk DPG, I think this podcast is going to blow your mind because they talk about Hotman and some of these and what they make, what the extrapolations and the points that they make are actually mind blowing. It's going to be pretty awesome to hear. It's coming up.
I read like 5 different pieces that all sort of led with like, so I haven't written about the Fire in like 3 weeks or a month, and it's just the same story. It's just depressing. It's just hard to get excited about them, and I think it's worth looking at a team that started so strongly and trying to get to the bottom of how we got here, where even some of their own writers are very not excited to talk about them.
Yeah, Joe, obviously this is a big soccer city, is Chicago, dating back to the Chicago Sting, who won a bunch of NASL titles.
Wouldn't know it.
As well.
No, there's no connection to the Sting in the city whatsoever.
Nope, there's none.
Is that so? Is that a thing where we didn't get the rights to that? And so we're not connecting to it? Is it a thing of being afraid of being like at the beginning of this whole thing of like being lame, like the quote unquote used to be? What exactly, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know anything about the Sting. And like they said, they won a few championships. Didn't they only win the last one?
They only won one. They won the last one. And I think the reason was that I think somebody owned the rights to them and weren't willing to give them up to the MLS. And which is fair, but I've seen the club try to do some sort of connection with this thing in terms of, I think they've done like, celebrating this thing's victory, and when like one of those Chicago soccer nights or whatever.
Okay.
They've done stuff like that.
Remember that?
I think they might have even done like a yellow jersey.
There was one black and yellow, wasn't there?
Yeah,
I forget what year that was.
Not the Morelia one, not the weird. Was that a Morelia one? I don't remember, but I remember they had a kind of like a black and yellow jersey.
Just big city. Like by all accounts, the Chicago Fire should be a big club in Major League Soccer. They should be a team that is fighting for like global name recognition in the way that the Galaxy have done, in the way that Inter Miami are doing right now, in the way that LAFC and to a lesser extent, but in different ways, the New York teams have done in their own football group kind of methods. But they're not. Chicago's the 3rd biggest city in the United States. It's diverse in population. Unlike, LA and New York City, there's only one team in Chicago. Like there are a lot of things going the Fire's way on paper. They have the ingredients. They've attracted, Ryan, as you said, even some notable stars. But the club has really, really struggled to lay out some of their issues very clearly at the top, or at least some of the results from those issues. They have not made the playoffs in 6 straight seasons. Ryan, you mentioned 2017. That is the most recent time, and they're probably going to make it 7 years in a row this season. They've made the playoffs just once in the last 11 seasons. They haven't made it past the first round of the playoffs since 2009. They are currently 13th in the Eastern Conference. They've allowed more goals than any Eastern Conference team this season. We talked about that on Tuesday. They rehired Frank Klopas, who pops up in all sorts of different spots throughout the Chicago Fire's history, as their manager after having him as interim for almost an entire season after letting go of Ezra Hendrickson last season. There are major
which they have
in
a similar record now.
The Fire, for me, to put it succinctly, in the year 2024, are at their core a story of an incredible amount of wasted potential.
Wow. Yeah, it's very true. Taylor, take us back then. Was there is there an alternate 1985 to use a Back to the Future terminology here? Did the path get diverted at some point?
Yes, it did. Wait till you hear this, DPG.
Yes. Founded in 97. As I said, they win inaugural MLS Cup. They win US Open Cup. Manager Bob Bradley, lest we forget. And it's crazy to look at the Fire, like going back to their founding and just see how many like big players, how much talent they have had, how many names in U.S. soccer they have had in that team. The team that goes on to win MLS Cup that year has Zach Thornton in goal. They've got Jesse Marsh, Carlos Bocanegra, Dimo Kovalenko, Peter Novak, Chris Armas, Hristo Stoichkov, Ante Razov, Josh Wolf comes off the bench, as does DeMarcus Beasley. Like, that is a stacked team. It is not surprising that they win it the way they do. And then, to my mind, that's when you have DC United being the dominant team in the East and in Major League Soccer. And growing
been a while for them too.
Chicago were a team I feared.
It has.
Because they were so good and came out of nowhere and just knocked DC off their perch a little bit. And that was what Chicago were. They were a really difficult team that had a bunch of talent, but were also going to be fighters if they needed to be, sometimes literally. And they have a super strong start. I've already talked about the silverware, but they make the playoffs up until 2004. That's the first time they missed the playoffs. So to be an expansion team and then kind of hit the ground running the way they did is not a feat that many can replicate. And then they start making decisions that I think lead them to a breaking point of sorts, beginning with the dismissal of Peter Wilt, who remains an incredibly popular figure in U.S. soccer.
That's it right there.
For independent teams and for lower leagues.
It is.
He is also just a very nice guy who will show up at soccer events and happy to talk to anybody, but is a big brain when it comes to U.S. soccer. And parting ways with him, I think largely a surprise. Maybe in retrospect, some of it can be pointed from the brokering of the Bridgeview deal, which sees the Fire move away from Soldier Field in Chicago, downtown Chicago, to Toyota Park in Bridgeview, which is about 30 minutes outside of Chicago. But I think also just did a ton for soccer in Chicago, continues to do a ton for soccer in Chicago, Peter Wilt. But you get more and more sort of tension building, especially once you have Andrew Hauptmann come in and takes over AEG's controlling interest. Joe, do you want to pick it up from there?
This is crazy.
Here,
I'll happily
pause.
pick it up. So the Fire, obviously.
Joe's about to drop some bombs.
No, this is you're right. This is about to be crazy, and this is probably going to be the last segment that we listen to and really dissect. But I'll say this. That 98 team that they just described was insane. And when you talk about, they missed the playoffs in 2004 and the wheels started coming off, that we missed the playoffs once up till 2009. It was 2004. And then we made it twice since, which is insane. And I haven't won a game since. But before Joe tells us all about this, I just want to say one last thing. I like to believe that no matter where Dimo Kovalenko is in life, no matter what job he has, he's still breaking legs and getting yellow cards, even if he's in finance.
Yeah.
They have a lot of early success. Taylor, you walked through a lot of their squad. One quick Peter Wilt nugget while we're in there. You mentioned some of the names on that 98 team and some folks that have been around the game for a really, really long time. Marsh, Armetz, Novak, Frank Lopas, Ante Razov, Josh Wolf, coached by Bob Bradley. All those names, right? We've run through those. Josh Wolf, there's a fun Josh Wolf tie-in here. A nice little laminated tie-in from 98. Apparently Peter Wilt, who was the GM for the Fire in their early years, clipped a Soccer America article, the Legends at Soccer America, with their experts' predictions, and only one of them had the Fire making the playoffs. I love the tie of Peter Wilt, who had helped build a roster that had Josh Wolf on it, cutting out expert predictions and posting them somewhere, like waving the piece of paper, and Josh Wolf 20 plus years later doing the exact same thing with his team in Austin. Like
Nothing's changed.
Nothing's changed. This is a Chicago Fire team early on that had a lot of very important figures in the American soccer landscape, and it found a lot of really strong American talent, a lot of strong talent from Europe. They had done a good job of building those early squads. Granted, it was a little easier at the time to stand out in Major League Soccer because the bar was lower, the talent level was lower, there were fewer teams. There were still questions about, hey, is MLS going to exist the next season? There are all sorts of those problems, and at the time, the Galaxy are owned by Anschutz Entertainment Group. They're owned by
This is
AEG,
critical.
the organization that still owns the LA Galaxy. And they owned a lot of teams, along with the Hunts. Like, this was an era, maybe some folks have heard of this era, where a few very, very wealthy individuals propped up basically all of Major League Soccer because the league was not in a good place. There was not a lot of interest. Things were not being especially well run.
And they still want kudos
and AEG
for it.
was one of those ownership groups that had everything really under their wing, along with the Hunts. There was a time when they had 6 clubs and the Lamar Hunt group had 3. So they were doing a lot of heavy lifting here at AEG, and the Fire were one of their teams. I was chatting with Timothy Holtz, who does great Fire coverage in the Discord. The Sing Electric is his name in the Discord. Great Fire coverage out in the Chicago landscape as well. And he made the point to me that the Fire were very clearly the second team in the AEG umbrella after the LA Galaxy. And as the Galaxy start to gain steam, suddenly the Fire are maybe not quite so interested or not quite so interesting to their owners. And eventually this leads to a sale. So they get sold to Andrew Hauptmann and a slightly larger group around him called Andel Holdings back in 2007. And again, Timothy made this point to me. The Fire's last hardware was in 2006. The DP rule came into effect for the 2007 season. Not really a coincidence. That's a direct quote. You have that ownership sale right around the time when the
pause
DP rule
this
comes in.
because
David Beckham is in Major League Soccer.
I would like to dispute that slightly because I would like to personally say that our only successful DP and was the first one, was Blanco. I think in the first DP era, like how stacked was those 07, 08, 09 teams? We had Justin Mapp, we had Quantum Blanco, we had Chris Rolfe playing well, we had
Gandhi.
yeah, we had Condi, we had Pardo, we had Samari, we had John Bush. Like those teams were stacked, and it was a lot of like Hopman using up what was left in the cupboard. And then by the time 2009 hit and everybody aged out and got too expensive and expansion drafts started happening every year, the cupboard ran dry and he never replaced it. But yeah, the DP era does kind of screw the Fire, but we were good on the very first one, at least. You had Blanco did a lot of heavy lifting here. It was a lot of fun to watch him play. It really was. Honestly.
And at that point, truly everything changes for MLS, where spending is different. The league it now has different aspirations that were not possible before David Beckham helped raise the profile of the league, even if that was not an initial success in terms of the Galaxy's play on the field and David Beckham's contributions. The Fire all of a sudden went from being a team that was sort of an upstart in Major League Soccer, lots of talent, to slowly becoming the second fiddle and further down the depth chart for AEG, to being sold to an owner that did not have a ton of financial resources in Andrew Hopman. And if you don't have the money to put together a good squad in an era of Major League Soccer that allows more spending and more differentiation than the era that came before it, like you're not in MLS 1.0 anymore. All of a sudden, there are some more stakes at the table, and the Fire under Hopman did not seem willing or capable of playing with the big boys.
Yeah, and I think
and that's key. Neither. He was neither capable or willing. And to be honest, I'm not capable or willing to listen to any more of this right now. But I will say this: they get a few timeline things wrong, but this is a very good episode. And for anybody else, I would listen to the rest of it because it really. But the one thing that I'm upset with, guys, and before we go to the next segment, I want to hear your guys' ideas. There was no answers. No answers given, right? Like, what do we do? What the hell do we do? I mean, I think we all agree, like Heights and Klopas have to go, but like, what next? What do we want? What kind of team do we want to see?
I'm not sure that a rebrand or even imagine this folding the team is the right answer because even
crazy.
Because think about this: when they did the rebrand, they went in such an opposite direction. It was like they did fold the team and restart anew.
Yeah, you're right. The crown was almost like a death.
It was like they folded the Fire, and now they're like, now we're the Crowns, and then they're like they had to fold that team completely, and now they're like, all right, now we're the Chicago Cubs soccer team.
Yeah, I
think they got to bring back the old crest.
I agree. The old crest is still way better than this new one. But this new one is still better than the crown.
So the thing is that you guys keep bringing up the old crest, and that's a beloved crest. I get that, but we have to realize that we have to move up with the times. We have to kind of modernize a little bit. That old crest was from 1998.
We'll take it, and then
it was beautiful. It was still the best one in the league.
That's fine. If one idea, and I thought about this. Hey, make a retro kit with the old crest. Wear it once or twice in a year as a retro. But I felt it was in a couple of people that I've showed the old crest to were like, yeah, it looks a little dated.
Same with Columbus Crew's crest. Their new crest sucks.
Their new their first rebrand, like I do miss the guys, the iconic Kai Kamara, the celebration. But like the second one was where it was at. It had a real Dortmund feel. Yep.
Yeah, the circle with the weird pattern.
It had the checkered pattern and I think that was by far their best. I don't like this new one.
That was a good one.
That one's classic like Fire. I agree.
But it's going to be the same in 20 years, right? Because we're falling into the same thing we did in the 90s. Like like the flag New England crest was pretty cool.
Do you think the Cubs are ever going to change their logo? Do you think the Bulls are ever going to change their logo? Do you think the Bears are ever going to change their logo?
The Bears have been wearing a C on the side of their head for 40 years?
But
so what the hell are the Chicago Fire doing?
So that's because NFL teams hardly ever change their logos.
Fair. But the logo ain't gonna fix shit.
The Sox have changed their
red
logos.
jerseys didn't fix anything either. Like we need smart soccer people. We need someone who understands anything. Like I'm exasperated, gentlemen. Let's try and collect ourselves and then actually talk about this team when we come back.
All right, sounds like a plan. Be right back here
Sounds
Stay
good.
tuned.
on Enemies of the Fire. Kick that like button.